What happens when you purify your body, your mind, your spirit? Something miraculous. The body begins to heal itself. Welcome to the Medicine Girl podcast, where each week we explore new ways to heal your body from the root, igniting your inner healer. You are the medicine. And now, here's your host, Robin Stebbins.
Welcome to the Medicine Girl podcast, Jerry Marzinsky. I really appreciate you being here. I've been trying to track you down. I think it's been almost 2 years.
Wow.
I had contacted you way back when I heard you on a podcast, and I was like, oh my gosh, I worked in locked mental hospitals. I really want to talk to you about my experience too, and what I would hear over and over from young, successful men who would always say the same thing, whether I was in Missouri, Washington, California. The CIA implanted a brain chip in my head, and ever since then, I hear voices telling me to kill myself.
Yeah, that's I've heard that a lot.
Yeah.
You know, so what they're doing is moving the responsibility totally away from them.
Right.
You know, so like there's nothing I can do about it. CIA did this thing. I got a brain chip in there. Nobody can find it, but I know there's one in there. You know, so they don't make any effort to try to recover themselves. I was doing in Milledgeville, Georgia, when I was working at the big psychiatric hospital there. We're trying to get them medicated and out of there.
Right.
The problem is they would go off their meds consistently. They wouldn't stay on those meds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You know,
I wouldn't either, though. I mean, those medications like clozapine or Clozaril at the time, the average weight gain was 100 pounds. Thorazine, you had that mask on your face.
Yep.
They had to drink coffee literally all day long to just stay awake enough to function. And coffee, cigarettes, back and forth between the two.
Well, it's beyond that, because when I started questioning them at Central State, I noticed that they'd all go off their medications. All right, eventually, sooner or later, they'd go off their medications. And then when they did, I started asking them, well, why'd you do that? And they said exactly like you said, the side effects are awful.
Yeah.
All right. So then I went to, got some of my experience and went to the DSM and wrote down all the effects of psychosis. You know, paranoia, seeing monsters, shadow people, it's like a living hell.
Right.
And I wrote that down and put it onto a check sheet. And then once they were back medicated and sane again, I would bring them in again and say, okay, why'd you go off your meds? Oh, it was a side effect. Okay, write down what side effects you experienced, because they didn't experience all the same side effects.
Right.
You know, from the same drug. So they'd write down a handful of side effects, and they were bad. You know, they're bad, no doubt about it. And then I'd give them the check sheet with all the symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia.
Right.
You know, the hallucinations, the paranoia, the voices, all the garbage that comes with it. And I'd say, just check which of these symptoms did you have when you became psychotic. Mm-hmm. And they'd check a bunch of them, and they were all awful. And then I'd give them both sheets back, and I'd say, which is worse? You know, which is worse, the side effects or being psychotic and out of your mind? Every single one of them would say being psychotic. And then I'd ask them, well, then why'd you go off your meds? You know what their consistent answer was? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It took another few years to figure that one out. Okay. And along with that, what I saw was that the assault rate on psychiatrists at this big state hospital I was at, I mean, it was huge. It had like 200 buildings. There were hundreds of staff.
Yeah.
And it sprawled over like 1,000 acres or more. I mean, it was massive. I mean, there were like 10,000 people there when I got there. So that didn't make any sense to me. Why are psychiatrists getting beat up by schizophrenics at a rate similar to that of attendants that are with these guys 24 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And the psychiatrists were only with them for 15, 20 minutes a month.
Right.
You know, how's your meds? They working? If they're not working, we'll up them, down them, change them, whatever. It was always about the meds, nothing else. They didn't talk about nothing else. But they were getting assaulted, physically assaulted by schizophrenics at a rate higher than any other staff, higher than psych nurses, higher than psychologists, higher than counselors, higher than recreation therapists, higher than anybody else except attendant staff, which were on the wards with them 24 hours a day.
Right.
So I'm like, what's going on there? What are they saying to these people that is bringing on assaults when they're only with them 15, 20 minutes a month? It was a complete conundrum to me until after the 7th year I was there. And what happened was one of the gals that I had on my caseload, she was in cosmetology class. She was doing real well as long as she was on her meds. But she had gone off her meds 3 times. And if they went off their meds 3 times, they figured, well, if they're not going to take their meds when they're being handed to them here at the state hospital, and they don't have to drive anywhere or pay anything for them, they're certainly not going to follow through when they leave. You know? So if they went off 3 times, we would discharge them.
Mm-hmm.
So this one gal who was doing real well, made good grades. She was a model student while she was on medications. We were preparing to discharge her, and I had to call her mother and say, you know, we're going to have to let her go. She won't stay on her meds. And back then, we didn't know anything else to do.
Right.
You know, it was all meds. They had us completely brainwashed that the only thing you could do with schizophrenia is take meds.
Yeah.
They're toxic.
It's chemical restraints. I mean, that's for the
Yes.
audience that doesn't know what psychotropic drugs are. It's chemical restraints. It basically takes the life force energy out of a person.
Turns you into a zombie.
100%.
So when I called the mother, she started begging me. She said, don't do that. I can't handle her. I can't deal with her here. You know, she's got to finish her classes, you know, and just virtually begging me not to do it. And she said, I'll drive to the state hospital. She was like 4 hours away. She said, I'll drive there and we'll figure out why she didn't take her meds.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know the same thing, you know, so I said, well, I got an ally, you know, so finally, maybe the two of us can figure out why these people are going off the meds. So come that Friday, she drove up and she was in my office, brought in the client. Both of us are asking her, you know, why'd you go off your meds? Tell us. And she goes, you won't believe me. You know, it's try me. I've seen some really weird stuff since I've been here. I don't think anything you tell me is going to surprise me. So finally, she started into her story. She said, the voices told me that the psychiatrist was poisoning me and pointed to the side effects of the medications as proof that I was being poisoned. Click.
Yeah.
Because I'd heard that a number of times before from other psychotic patients. So here it was, the voices telling them that the psychiatrist was poisoning them. So when they went to see the psychiatrist, the males especially would attack the psychiatrist because they were being poisoned. Then they were being poisoned. Those drugs are toxic.
Exactly.
You know, so it was true. What the voices were telling was true. It shrinks their brains. They found that out with autopsy. It shrinks their peripheral and their central nervous system and does permanent neurological damage.
Right.
So what the voices were telling these guys were true, and then it made sense why the psychiatrists were being assaulted and in some cases murdered.
Yeah.
I didn't hear of any murders at the state hospital, but I heard of murders out in the community.
Right.
Where the psychotic patient would actually kill the psychiatrist.
Right. Yeah, no, and that's exactly what my success wound up as, because my job was to pump whatever the psychiatrist said.
Yep.
You got to take your meds, you got to take your meds. And so what I would say, though, is like I would tell them straight up, I wouldn't take these drugs either. But I don't have a chronic mental illness. So let's see the sweet spot. So you're not quite comatose and a zombie, but let's get the medications down to a point where you're not being ruled by the voices. Because some of my patients' voices were really frightening. Like one gentleman had stabbed himself in the eye, and he when he would hear the voices, like he would have the fork in his hand and he's like, I need help. So
that's interesting, because I had two patients, the voices told them, if you gouge out your eye, we'll go away and we won't come back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this sounds like maybe another one.
Yeah.
You know,
They make those
it
deals.
looks like it's on their playlist, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Weird.
And that's constant.
Yeah.
You know, like,
And then when they gouge out their eye, they show up and start laughing them and
Yeah.
mocking them. How
Can't believe
stupid
you
can
did
you
that.
be? You know,
Exactly.
you know, and just making fun of them and saying, now you're a freak.
yeah. Yeah. And then what alternative do they have? To take these really hardcore toxic poisons that
Yes.
make them feel like, what's the point of living then if I'm just a zombie and a shell of a person? So I would help people manage to be on the least amount of drugs possible. And we actually had a good psychiatrist that was from British Columbia that would drive down to Bellingham and would see these patients. And I felt like he was a little more forward thinking. Like most psychiatrists roll their eyes at,
Yeah.
even the sound of my voice.
Yes.
But he would actually listen to me, and we would actually kind of formulate some really good protocols, and got a lot of patients. A 6'7" giant guy from Western State had, the most assault records of any patient. I got him out on his own. Turns out he was like a sweetheart, but just terrified of everyone. And that was the only thing he knew, was to be combative. So we worked on all of that. And it was my key to success with working with these patients is I would see them as I see you or I see anybody else on the planet. There was no hierarchy. And it's like, you want to get outside on your own and get out of this hospital. I want you to. Let's see how we can do that collaboratively. And then, as we spoke about that, then everything is on them. If you spend all your money on cigarettes and don't have enough to eat, I'm not a bleeding heart. I'm not going to give you any money. You're going to be hungry, have to go to the food bank. So it was real world consequences. And then lo and behold, they would rise up. It's like, yeah, that kind of sucked last month, not having enough food because I spent it all on cigarettes. So I'm going to balance it.
There's something about psychotics and cigarettes. I mean, they just, it's like they just smoke like steam engines.
Yeah.
I mean, at the state hospital, they would go around and pick up butts just to get a little.
I saw it.
One little puff, and their fingers were burnt.
Yeah.
Because there's some kind of link between the two. I don't know what it is.
It's the nicotine. Supposedly, the stimulants like the nicotine and the caffeine would help mitigate some of the symptoms of the drugs. But I mean, I felt for him to the point where, I was like, I got to dedicate my mission then to finding a real answer, because I just didn't think that at that time, I was in my early 20s. I innocently believed the medical industrial complex just didn't have the information yet. I didn't think it was on purpose to keep these people in chemical restraints, and they didn't really care to want anyone to improve.
No, it was all about the drugs.
Yeah.
Everything centered around the drugs. And I was in the same position you were. I was like the watchdog. If they started going out of control, I'd have to turn them into the psychiatrist.
Yeah.
But what I saw was there was a one-to-one correlation between how strong their voices were and how much time they spent listening to them or resisting them and their behavior.
Okay.
So after a while, it's like, okay, what are these voices telling them?
Right.
Because nowhere in undergraduate or graduate school, or even in the PhD program, did anybody present anything about the voices other than that they were auditory or visual hallucinations. That's it. So I thought when I got onto the front lines, I thought, well, they're hallucinations. It's like word salad.
Right.
It's just garbage. But then I saw these patients actually carrying on coherent, seemingly logical conversations with somebody I couldn't see.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what's going on there?
Mm-hmm.
It didn't match what I'd been taught, the little I'd been taught in graduate school about the voices, which were hallucinations. So I was thinking, well, if they're hallucinations, they're just random like all other hallucinations. It's just a bunch of gobbledygook
Yeah.
Spinning around their brains. Then it slowly dawned on me that that wasn't the case. I mean, there was one woman who was hearing voices, and she was arguing with her voices who were telling her to leave the hospital grounds, and arguing with them as she was leaving the hospital grounds. So it's like the little they told me about the voices didn't match up with what I was seeing.
Right.
And so I started asking staff, what are these voices? Oh, they're auditory hallucinations due to a chemical imbalance of the brain.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. And I believe that, because that's what I was told in school. But I came on, but then after a while, I noticed something that just didn't freaking make any sense. I was with the psychiatrist a lot of time when they were prescribing drugs for these people. And you'd think if it's a chemical imbalance, they would want to give some kind of test, some kind of lab test or EEG or EKG, some kind of objective test to determine what chemicals in the brain were out of balance and by how much. It did not exist.
Right.
None of them were doing that.
Yeah.
So I walked up to one day. I said, what's the deal? If it's a chemical imbalance, how do you know what you're even treating? I mean, there's like 23 neurotransmitters in the brain, something like that. How do you know which ones are out of balance or by how much? And what are you treating? Yeah. And the guy says, the psychiatrist, he goes, we let the drug companies determine that and which drugs work for, these kind of symptoms. And it just blew my mind. I'm like, that's like letting the fox in the hen house.
Yeah.
It's like, I didn't say anything to him, but I was just like, you've got to be friggin' kidding.
Yeah.
He wasn't. They have no test.
That's right. That's exactly right.
They don't even know which chemicals, which transmitters are out of, what the chemical balance of the brain should be. They have no idea.
This deserves exclamation points times 1,000, because what you're saying is you're revealing what I call the medical industrial complex. So they experiment first once they find a chemical, then they give it to someone and they see what it does to that person. Then they make up the disease or the DSM category so that the drug now is curing the disease where they have always reverse engineered it. That's what I wrote a Substack on called Lab Value Larceny. They're not checking your cholesterol to lower it to make you healthier. They found a drug that changes a value on a lab marker. Same with vitamin D3. That's the game. So they don't have, they don't plug people into a computer that says schizoaffective disorder with, XYZ, and this drug will help balance the dopamine and the serotonin.
No, it's like a dartboard. They throw the dart and go, well, we'll start with this one. That kind of works for some other people. I mean, it's completely subjective.
Yeah, and the same, but that's the same in the allopathic when you go to the doctor and you give them your blood and they tell you have high cholesterol and low HDL and high LDL. It has nothing to do with your health. Same with schizophrenia and changing these markers. It has nothing to do with your brain health. It's just going to mask the symptoms so they can tell you it's working.
That's exactly what it is. They're treating symptoms. They're not getting at the cause. And then they make up the causes.
Exactly.
So, they started by blaming mother, and then they kicked it up to the genetics and said, it's genetics doing this. It's they got away with that for almost a decade.
Yeah.
It's a genetics. There's some genetic thing. And then finally the geneticist caught up with them because it's a very small number of people who can investigate something like that. So they take it out of the public domain and throw it up there into a little scientific box that only a few people can deal with, like geneticists, biogenetics. And by the time the biogenetics people got around to it, they found we don't find any marker for schizophrenia. We don't find any gene for schizophrenia. And they went,
or any other ones.
Yeah, or any other ones. And they go, it's not just one gene. It's a bunch of genes, and they're all mixed together, and they're all interacting, and we'll figure it out eventually. But it is genes. We know it is. Bunch of crap. And then they went with the biochemical imbalance thing, and that was started by Eli Lilly back in 1991, I think, when Prozac came out. I got a little note here on that. It was not until the late 1980s after the release of the landmark antidepressant Prozac that the idea of the chemical imbalance hit the psychiatric mainstream. As the psychiatrist Peter Brigham, 1991, points out in his book Toxic Psychiatry, the drug company Eli Lilly advanced the chemical imbalance theory as a marketing scheme to sell their new drug Prozac. There was, of course, no demonstrable evidence showing that depressed patients had any imbalance, but Lilly ran with it. They knew it was a lie at the time. They ran with it anyway. Before long, psychiatrists and psychiatric patients and the educational system alike came to identify with the idea that mental disorders are caused by a chemical imbalance of the brain. And that's where we are today, even though it's been steadfastly disproven over and over. You know, I saw an advertisement not too long ago for an antipsychotic saying it is believed that.
Yeah.
You know, mental illness is caused by a chemical imbalance. So they're continuing with their lies and deceptions.
But they have to sell the drugs. Like if all of us knew that you can't get sick unless you're poisoned, and we started to look at, in terms of psychiatric disorders, we started to look at what's the heavy metal content of your brain, what electroconductivity is your body right now. Do you have copper lodged in your tissues? Do you have silver, which is one of the, it's actually a superconductor, and people are guzzling colloidal silver like it's going out of style. When does it cross the blood-brain barrier? Because everybody's different, and we don't have a control. I don't have a Robin 2.0 that didn't get the treatment or that had the heavy metals removed by my parasites. So it's a perfect Ponzi scheme.
Yep.
Just make up the background. You're too stupid to figure it out. You're not a genius.
Right.
So we're gonna have to break it down for you. And they're controlled by the pharmaceutical industry to run the narrative so that we get to buy their saviors in a pill.
Yep. And here's the extent to which they're controlled. The antidepressant market in the United States is expected to reach $15.98 billion, not million, billion dollars by 2023. It's probably already past it. The global antipsychotic sales hit $14.54 billion in 2021 and is expected to reach $15.5 billion by 2022. We're talking billion.
And that's their point one. Then they 10x or 100x that amount by the downstream illnesses that taking those drugs causes.
Yeah. Yeah, they throw Cogentin on top of it. So when the neurological effects start showing up.
Metformin for your bladder because your kidneys start shutting down and.
Right.
You got to smoke
all this other crap on there to mask the symptoms of these drugs.
To mask the symptoms of the drugs, and then eventually your body completely falls apart.
And they are so arrogant. They are so friggin' arrogant for the most part. I've seen one or two, like the one you were talking about, that were reasonable. But the rest of them were just like, you know, there was one guy at the state hospital who dressed like Sigmund Freud. You know, he had a beard, and he had a mustache, and walked around with like a blazer jacket.
I'm glad I didn't meet him.
Oh, he got it. One of the schizophrenics got him. This was hilarious. So he would do like we're telling he would just drug the crap out of these guys, you know, and if they caused them any trouble, he'd just drug them more. So I remember one time in one of the classes I had in graduate school, they were saying, well, these schizophrenics are too disorganized to do any high level planning. Okay. So I believe that. I didn't know any better. But one day I had a call from a friend who worked on another psych unit. He said, you got to come over here and take a look at this. And I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, just come on over here. You know, you got free time, come on over here. So I went over there, and I'd already met this Dr. Freud earlier. So I knew what he looked like. I knew what he acted like. He was a complete idiot. And so we went to his office, and on his desk was a pile of feces shaped. The guy smoked a pipe, shaped into the pipe on his desk. So he walked around smoking a pipe like Freud. So what happened? One of the schizophrenics up on the third floor somehow got through 3 floors past the nurses' stations on each floor and got down to the first floor, broke into his office, got up on his desk, crapped on his desk, shaped it into a pipe, and then escaped the hospital. They never found the guy.
Wow.
So much for not being able to do complex planning.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that self-righteous arrogance of a psychiatrist, that was, I think, the hardest part of my job, to see these numbskulls actively poisoning people with no hope in sight, and anything to the contrary, like, hey, could we try this or could we try that? And at that time when I was doing,
they didn't want to hear it.
They didn't want to hear it.
Yep.
Because
we're the experts.
They know they're at the top of the hierarchy, and I call it's not intelligence quotient. You don't have a high IQ. In intelligence, you have a high indoctrination quotient. And so the matrix, or the powers that be, they know the goats that are going to lead the sheep. So they completely put their energy into brainwashing and programming the goats, which is the doctors, the psychiatrists, the attorneys, because the sheep will look to the goats for the answers when they're in fear. And so your kid at 18 or 24 is, painting the walls black and writing Satan everywhere, and you're terrified, you need answers. So you go into the white coat with their authority and their stethoscope, and you believe literally anything they'll tell you. Okay. Right. So they tell you gotta have to poison your kid. You're just like, sign me up.
Yep. Exactly what they do. And you look at right now in the United States, there's more psychiatrists, there's more psychologists, there's more psychiatric medications than ever in the history of mankind.
Right.
And there are 50,000 people a year killing themselves in the U.S., a good many of them on these antipsychotic and antidepressant drugs. And the death rate is increasing.
Right.
Okay.
And they know it. So this isn't something that, we weren't aware. It says it. And I went through this whole thing myself personally. My hair was falling out after I got married. I was in a toxic relationship. I went to the doctor. They said, well, maybe you have low thyroid, but I think you're depressed. Gave me Prozac. Prozac has an extremely long half-life. I went bananas. Manic, crazy ideas. But no, it was something wrong with me.
Right.
It wasn't the Prozac. I must have been bipolar. That's why I had the episode. So then they give me a bipolar
drug. Yep. And it just I got into trouble with them so many times just because of that.
Right.
Where they just one psychiatrist wasn't even listening to the patient. He was listening to the mother.
Yeah.
And then diagnosing and medicating the patient based on what the mother said.
Yeah.
And those two weren't getting along at all.
Exactly. I saw that so often. And the parent's a conservator, and they don't have the kid's best interest at heart, and they're actively trying to destroy their child.
Yeah, to drug them senseless so they can't give them any crap back.
Yeah.
And I stepped into that one time with one psychiatrist, man, and he went after me like, a demon. Mm-hmm. He was demanding that my boss fire me because I brought that up and threw it in his face and said, look, you're just over medicating this kid, and you give one drug on top of another drug on top of another drug, and you're turning the kid into a freaking zombie.
Exactly.
Oh, he didn't want to hear that.
Well, they don't want to hear it because they're God. They're in a position of God, and their ideas and their authority reign true. So God doesn't make mistakes. So anytime you come up and point out, like, hey, I think you're doing something against this person's best interest, then you're going to be attacked. And I think the word demon perfectly describes these people.
Yeah.
These psychiatrists are demon. They're mean. They're arrogant.
Yes.
Vindictive.
Yep.
All of the patients suffer because of that. And then just to quickly touch on the SSRIs and the SNRIs, on the insert, it says
suicidal ideation,
homicidal ideation. That's a known side effect of these drugs.
And you look at these mass shooters,
right,
on Prozac.
I experienced it myself. I was down at the bottom. I was in my late 20s, but I was in that same place. I got 5150 because I had called the suicide hotline. Like, I was in distress. Like, I was not in control of my thoughts. I was not in control of my body, all because of Prozac. And so they locked me up. The nurses were horrible. The doctors were even worse. And just so happened, this one gentleman that was they called them MHPs at the time, mental health professional, they were master level, came in, connected with me, and just said, this is the Prozac, and you're going to have to ride it through until it gets out of your system. And nobody had said anything about the Prozac.
No.
They doubled the dose because it wasn't working.
And I never saw them actually outline to the patient ever.
Right.
How dangerous those drugs were, or what the toxic effects would be. What they would tell them, oh, well, your mouth will get dry, there might be some sexual dysfunction, your eyes will get blurry. Everything else was left off.
Yeah.
All the toxic malignant syndromes that come along with that.
Exactly.
The echinacea, the tongue darting, the neurological deficits and destruction of your central nervous system, never mentioned.
Right.
Never.
And once you have tardive dyskinesia,
yep, then they pile another drug on, cogentin, to
that. And it's irreversible. You don't go back from that.
Right.
So if they ever told the person and their family these side effects and the truth, nobody would take them. You say, there's got to be another way.
But it's good to have somebody who's been through what I did. What I did with seeing this, and when you found a reasonable psychiatrist who would actually listen to you, it was like such a rare occurrence. It was like a pleasure. I can actually talk to this guy. And the rest of them were just like puffed up. Don't tell me what to do. Who's the doctor, me or you?
Exactly.
Oh man. So and then you can move on to their DSM. That's a bunch of crap also. Completely made up.
Let's touch on that. And as the listeners are going through this is what I describe as the playbook. So
it's their Bible.
It's their Bible.
Their Bible.
Yes.
So when I was in the PhD program, that was like the big thing. It was like, you need to memorize this book, or you need to, and they give you tests on this crap. I didn't know then that they completely made it up. It's a group of like 6 or 7 psychiatrists that get together once every 3 years, and they make up these friggin' diagnoses.
Because they have a drug now. So
can they make a drug that will treat these side effects somehow? That's what they're looking for.
I think they have the drug first, they see what it does, then they come together and they make up these new
I wouldn't
diseases.
be surprised. It's a complete work of fiction.
Yes.
Every single one of the more than 296 psychiatric disorders in the DSM-5 and later have been completely made up by a group of psychiatrists. And I've heard it's like a tobacco barn where they come in there and they go, oh, I got a new illness and it's this, and then they all vote on it to see if they can either make a drug or they already have one for it. And some of the ridiculous things they come up with is mathematics disorder is now in the DSM. So if you don't like a math and arithmetic, you're disordered. You're psychologically disordered.
Yeah.
So I meet that one. I hate math.
You remember early on when you're taking these classes, like you find yourself in all of these diagrams.
Yes. Abnormal psychology. I'm like, I got that.
Oh my God. I've had that.
Yeah. Caffeine intoxication disorder. You drink too much coffee. You're disordered.
Yeah.
You're psychologically disordered. Sibling relational disorder. 2 kids fighting. They're disordered. Sexual orientation disturbance. Homosexuality. They even got some real flyers in there like Florence syndrome. Being overwhelmed by the beauty of Florence.
By the beauty of Florence?
Yeah.
As in Italy?
Such as Florence, Italy. And the symptoms are fainting and dizziness, and the treatment is antidepressants.
Oh, of course.
Isn't that wonderful? Paris syndrome, mostly experienced by Japanese patients visiting France. Symptoms include depression, anxiety, feelings of persecution, which before the DSM would have just been cultural shock.
Wow.
I even heard they had one in there one time called Southern Belle syndrome. They had mental retardation, but it's like every single one of them have been made up. They're all fabricated. In 1952, the DSM listed 106 psychiatric disorders. In 1980, it listed 256 psychiatric disorders. And the DSM-5 now has, 297 psychiatric disorders. And they're fabricating more every year,
And you look at then
Now,
why and who are these psychiatrists? I can guarantee you, if I really started digging,
2/3 are involved with big pharma.
yeah, of course they are. Big pharma is a $1 trillion empire. They control everything,
including the Congress and the Senate.
Yeah, so there's never going to be a modality that says, okay, let's remove your heavy metals safely with harmonized parasites. Parasites get rid of heavy metals, but what are both sides told to do all the time? Take ivermectin and kill your parasites, take wormwood or grapefruit seed extract to kill the parasites. The parasites are taking out the metals intact. There's
It's news to me.
Yeah. Well, of course it is, because Rockefeller was very clever at taking over both sides.
Yep, back in the
20s. So it was like in 1920s, it was here's allopathic, and so we're going to have petroleum-based drugs. It's the bad guys. We're going to tell you what it is. Even list the horrible side effects right on the bottle of pills. But here's for the people that don't want to take the petroleum-based products. We're going to give you the good drugs. We're going to give you the vitamins and the supplements. Pharmaceutical industry invented both of them. So now,
here's a little statement on the pharmaceutical industry. Said the influence of the pharmaceutical companies' drive for profits are affecting every aspect of medicine. So blatant now that you'd have to be deaf, blind, and dumb not to see it. We have just allowed them to take over, and it's our fault, the whole community. To this day, there's not a single biological test for any mental disorder, despite the psychiatric mafia claim to the contrary. There's not a single peer-reviewed article that can be accurately cited to directly support claims of serotonin deficiency in any mental disorder. While there are many articles that present counter evidence, Jeffrey Lacrosse, Jonathan, serotonin and depression, a disconnect between the advertisements and the scientific literature. The Journal of Medicine, something, November 2005. There's no evidence that serotonin causes depression at all, and yet they're making billions of dollars selling this garbage every year.
Yeah, and when I bring this up to people, they attack me.
Yeah.
I'm somehow working as a shill, trying to keep the good drugs away from them. Or if it's the functional, I'm the one that's saying don't take colloidal silver because it is a superconductor and actually lodges directly into your brain tissue. And then what happens when we put on headphones? Magnets. All of these are creating, I think, they want us as sort of a hybrid human on the smart grid. Here's your LED light bulbs that are part of the smart grid. Your refrigerator is attached to it, and so are you. So they can actually read your biometrics. They know what your heart rate is, your pulse, remotely. The more metal you have in your body. And so when we have a giant DSM-5 filled with all of these different diagnoses, the solution can only be a drug, because the root problem then is complicated genetics and it wasn't your fault, when we're taking the light away from what the true root causes are. I don't believe you can get sick unless you're poisoned. And so if we start to look at all of the different ways that person was poisoned and we address those root causes, the body will seek only homeostasis or harmony.
Well, I've seen too many people on the front lines that were psychotic, and virtually all of them had severe, very severe physical, emotional, or sexual abuse. And
But I see normal people that have had severe physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. And so,
right, so that's where the voices come in.
yeah,
You know, one thing I noticed was that these voices were running patterns,
yes,
you know, and nobody was interested in what the voices were saying to these patients, you know. So I started asking them, you know, because there was a one-to-one correspondence between how strong they were and how much they listened to them and their behavior, which went nuts.
right.
So, you know, curious, nobody, and there were hundreds and hundreds of staff at this large hospital I'd worked at, none of them were interested in anything about the voices, what they were telling these people,
Yeah,
you know? And, you know, after I saw that they weren't, you know, what do you, garbage, what do you call it, word cabbage?
word salad. Yeah,
Where they weren't word salad, they were speaking in complete sentences and
right.
carrying on coherent conversations. I went, well, okay, what are these things?
Yeah,
You know, so nobody at the hospital knew. And there's hallucinations.
mm-hmm.
They didn't look any further. They weren't even
Right.
the least bit curious. So I started asking these patients, you know, what are they telling you? And the voices didn't like that. You know, so, and the other thing we had going on is the same thing you had going on, is that we were spies for psychiatry. If
Right.
somebody's going out and going crazy, our job was to turn them in so they could be
Right.
drugged, right?
Exactly.
So they didn't trust us very much. So it took a while to get them to trust me. Matter of fact, a couple of years, I think it
Yeah.
was. And then I saw the patterns started coming out, and the first pattern that came out were the voices were consistently negative. They never said anything good. It was like they were abusive, they were insulting, they were derogatory, they were destructive, they were consistently negative all the time. You're no good, you're rotten, you're ugly, you're stupid, your girlfriend's cheating on you, your husband's cheating on you, your wife's cheating on you. It was just always horrible, the worst stuff that you can imagine, just coming out, and this is what they were hearing.
Yeah.
Right? And so,
And this is 24 hours a day, by the way, like for the most part.
well, some of them it was 24. Sometimes they would wear them out and they'd go away for a while, but they'd
Yeah.
return, you know. But it was always the same stuff.
Right.
It was all this negative stuff. And I'm like, well, why, if they're hallucinations like the psychiatric mafia says they are, how come they're not random like all other hallucinations? How come they're not all over the place?
Right.
You know? But they weren't. They were consistently negative. So it was like, why are they consistently negative? Why aren't they random? What is holding them on that negative path? You know, it reminded me of a movie I saw once where the destroyer was hunting a U-boat, and the U-boat would keep returning to this same course to get back to the coast of France, where the U-boat pens were. So when the destroyer lost them, the destroyer captain just turned the destroyer onto that course and caught him again. You know, so it's like something is holding these voices on that negative trajectory.
Almost like a radio station that somehow they specifically are tuned into
Yes, broadcasting negative garbage constantly.
constantly.
So the negative, the next, you know. So I was asking these patients question after question after question, and then another pattern came out. The voices were consistently anti-religious. They resisted their victim attending church, reading the Bible, following any positive spiritual path, praying, or doing anything like that. I remember one patient came to me, he said, you know, I started praying the 23rd Psalm when the voices started, and they reacted like worms thrown on a hot frying pan.
Right.
So I started asking other patients, you know, what happens when you went to church? You know, what happens when you pray? What happens when you try to read the Bible? And it was the same stuff. I found there were 3 classes. If the voices were weak, if they went to church, they would shut up. If they were moderate strength, the voices would get louder and drown out what the preacher was trying to tell the person. And if they were very strong, the guy would get up and run out of the church. Just run out of the church. You know, so why would a hallucination be anti-religious?
Yeah.
There's another one. So, but as I'm asking them these questions about their voices, one of them, the voices didn't like it, and he went and he told the psychiatrist that I was asking him questions about the voices. The next morning, I ended up in the psychiatrist's office, door closed, on the red carpet, and the psychiatrist is going, "Don't you dare ask these patients anything more about their voices. They're hallucinations, and what you're doing is increasing their strength, making them worse, and making the patients worse."
And that's what I heard daily.
Now.
Yeah, because we were supposed to do, I can't remember exactly what it was called, but reality-based orientation. So if they were expressing a delusion, like I had a adorable little elderly woman that wanted to get slick hand surgery, and the slick hand surgery was going to heal all of her problems and get rid of the voices. And so you're supposed to say there's no such thing as slick hand surgery, and you need to take your medications to get rid of the voices. That's the only way. But I would never do that. I'm working one-on-one with these people. Nobody hears what I say. So I would always say, okay, so how do you think we could get you some slick hand surgery? And we would just kind of have these conversations. So then you'd kind of get to the bottom of what was really underneath it. For her, it was they had taken her baby away when she had her first psychotic break and never saw the baby again. So we worked kind of through that aspect and allowed her that space. Yeah, to allow her that space to start to heal that deep wound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's usually a trauma underneath there. I didn't find anything that worked real well for them until I ran into an energetic psychotherapy called MACE. Mm-hmm. It deals with the trauma that's embedded in the subconscious.
Right.
And it'll get this stuff out in an hour. It's gone. It's like it's energetic. Your feelings are energy. Your thoughts are energy. Your body's energy. Your spirit's energy. It's all energy. It's not physical, Mm-hmm. It's energy. So they have this stuff lodged in their subconscious mind, and it's a pool of negative energy, and it's kind of like a car battery. So you can get a car battery, charge it up full, and if you drain it down all the way to nothing, it's worthless. It won't work anymore.
Right.
It's the same thing with these pools of negative energy that are built up during a trauma. If you can drain them down to nothing, they're gone. The patient still remembers the trauma, but there's no emotional attachment to it at all. It's gone.
Yes.
And it works within an hour. I've never seen anything like it. They call it causism because it gets to the cause of the mental illness. I've never seen anything like it. And I started using what I could get from the books. And then some guy out of clear blue writes me on the internet and says, I have somebody you need to meet, which is a lot different than most of the messages I get over the email. And he goes, at worst, she'll be just a jolly old lady. But I think you'd be interested in what she has to say. So I thought about that. And then, I'm like, well, should I blow this off? And I decided, okay, I'll meet with her. And it turned out she was the chief training officer for the MACE organization in Australia. I had no idea.
Yeah.
So I got to talking to her, and I told her, I said, well, I've read all of Mace's books, and what he's written so far is working. It's working better than anything I've seen in my entire career.
Right.
And I said, why should I, pay $5,000 to take this course? She said, all you got was the tip of the iceberg. So I went and I took it, and I've been a MACE therapist for the last 3-4 years now. I've never seen anything work like this.
Do you have any really specific miracle stories you can share?
Well, people who have been badly abused, and it's common. It's just so common. With schizophrenics, it's a lot harder. Okay, so we can go after the voices. The voices that are weak, I've seen them completely disappear. We treat them as a negative identity. So what MACE calls the subconscious stuff that's buried is a negative identity.
Right.
So it's like a negative, it's like a computer virus, but it's a mind virus. So what happens during a trauma is there's a horrible feeling, and it just doesn't go away.
Yeah.
And in conjunction with that horrible feeling, there's a decision that's made as to what part that person played in that trauma or bringing that trauma on. Both of them are very painful. And after a while, the ego shows up and goes, okay, you've had enough pain, because pain is not, it's not a survival emotion, oppression and pain. So it says, okay, let me handle this. And it takes it and it buries it in the subconscious and locks it down.
Right.
So it's still there. It's still alive. It's not gone anywhere. Right. So the way it shows up is then the mind just projects it out into the environment. So anybody who resembles the person who caused that trauma, this thing triggers. It goes off. This guy's a little bit too close to this buried junk. Either attack him, run from him, or avoid him. Okay. So anytime somebody like that shows up, this thing triggers and it tears up relationships really bad. Because it's like a landmine. So there might be a bunch of traits to what happened, and if it triggers a certain number of them, this thing goes off, and every time it goes off, it gets stronger. Right? So it starts taking over the person, and it's the spirit that actually gets rid of it. Okay? Because it's negative energy. Your thoughts are energy. Your body's, your memory's energy. Everything's energy. That negative identity is also energy, stored negative energy. So what happened, what John Mace found was negative energy is attracted to positive energy, and positive energy will absorb it and transmute it. Okay? So what happens when you do this successfully, that thing is drained.
Okay.
It's gone. And, we work in the energy universe. There's no time, space, or matter there. So they're working with their eyes closed in their own heads, dealing with this thing. And you form it into an image, which is a symbol for the negative energy that's trapped there.
Okay.
Once that picture is gone, the negative energy is gone with it.
Okay.
They open their eyes. How do you feel? Do you still feel, depressed? Go back to the situation that triggered this trauma. How do you feel about it now? They go, well, I remember it, but there's no emotional charge to it.
Right.
And this happens all within an hour. I've never seen anything like it. Nothing even close. And they're totally ignoring it. The institute went to the legislature in Sydney, Australia, and demonstrated it for them. They totally ignored it. They took it to one of the major universities in Australia, demonstrated how well it worked. They totally ignored it.
But who's funding the universities? Why would they want something that's going to cure or heal a person? You lose a customer. It's not in there.
They don't. They just turn their back to this. They're totally ignoring it.
So walk us through, let's say somebody comes in with schizophrenia, and I would refer to people, I said, you have schizophrenia, you're not a schizophrenic. And usually just that subtle shift in mindset would be like, okay, now it's like I have a disease that I can work towards removing. I can get rid of it. It's not attached to me.
Yeah, there's something similar that I do. With the voices. It's like, see, one of the biggest battles schizophrenics has to fight is whether those voices are them or not.
Right.
Because they want them to believe that they're them. And I've had, a number of prisoners ask them, who are you? What are you? And the response was, we are you.
Yeah.
So the voices want them to believe that what they're hearing in their head is actually them.
But what a perfect plot twist if you're the one kind of ruling the show that is profiting from the drugs that are treating people that are hearing voices, because that's the only solution. And I don't know how much you've researched voice to skull technology.
Not a lot, although I've run into some people that claim they hear it, but I've never got to work with one. So I'm kind of wondering if if the patterns of the voices they hear are the same as those of a real schizophrenic.
Yeah.
I don't know because I've never worked with one who says they're hearing voice to skull technology.
I mean, I have someone that I know personally that's written Substacks on it that you might find really interesting. He has to go by just a pseudonym because of the work that he's doing, and we get attacked all the time. But Agent 131711 on Substack has written about voice to skull technology because he himself was experiencing that. I had experiences with it also when I was drinking too much soda out of a can. And whatever was going on, I heard a narrator in my head.
I've heard it exists. So there's too many people saying
there's patents on it.
Otherwise, yeah. So, and I have mixed feelings about releasing these patterns that the actual schizophrenic voices run, because if they got that, they could completely mask what they're doing, completely mask it, because these are the patterns would be identical to the ones that the voices run.
Right. So let's just say, okay, so a person that has schizophrenia comes in to see you to use this MACE therapy. What are some of the amazing transformations you've seen within an hour of somebody who has had a chronic go of it?
If it's chronic, it's much harder.
Okay.
Okay. If it's light, so what they treat, MACE has, they calls what happened to the person, the stuff that's buried in the subconscious, that pool of negative energy, that program.
Right.
Like, so something bad happens. And one of the most common ones is you're worthless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So something bad happens, and they make a decision because that bad thing happened that they're worthless.
Right.
Okay. So that's buried in there. It's now a mind program. Okay. So what you do is you find that part of the mind, the part of the person that's telling them they're worthless.
Sure.
And turn it into a listing of characteristics. So you're taking it from a label to a operational definition of the characteristics of this voice or this part of the person that's telling them that they're worthless.
Okay.
Okay. And once you can form that into an image, okay, you say, okay, what does this thing look like? All right. Once they got the image, you can bring a connection between spirit through the attention to that image, and that image is a representation of that negative energy. Okay.
Okay.
And as that image shrinks, that negative energy goes with it. So it's kind of like draining a car battery. You drain it down till it's nothing, and then you can't charge it again.
So nothing's looping anymore.
No,
in
it's
the
gone.
circuitry.
No, that negative energy that was buried in the subconscious is now gone.
So you've taken out the charge from.
No, I haven't taken it. The spirit does it. Okay. So, like I said, negative energy is attracted to positive energy, and the positive energy will take it and transmute it.
Right.
And after they can feel it, they can feel themselves lighten up as this pool of negative energy leaves. Right. And then when you're done, it's like, okay, go back to that trauma. What do you feel about it now?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't bother me. It's negative. It's I can remember it, but there's no charge to it.
Sure. And so have you seen people then come in actively hearing voices, actively responding to voices, being on psychotropic drugs to then no longer hearing voices and not having to take medications?
Well, it's with them, it's a lot different. Okay. So if the voices are weak, MACE will usually get rid of it.
Okay.
It will get rid of them sometimes by treating the voices as the negative identity. And bringing out the personality traits of the voices. But what happens a lot of times is the voices show up and they go, don't listen to this guy, he's crazy. And they won't let them concentrate. So they have to be able to form an image to attach that negative emotion to. If they can't form that image, if they're being blocked from it like the voices do, and they cause headaches, they cause felt pain, so it gets real complicated with the stronger ones. But if they can concentrate, you can remove the traumas that these voices are feeding off of.
And so, I just want to distinguish too between voice to skull technology as a voice that you hear inside your head. It's like a narrator, like your inner voice, whereas auditory hallucinations, you actually hear them from outside.
No, most of them are hearing them inside.
So similar to voice to skull technology.
Similar to voice to skull.
Most of the patients I worked with would hear it outside. They would hear it outside the window or outside the door, or it was just somewhere outside of them where it would be saying, you need to kill yourself, or I have a gun outside the window, I'm going to shoot you.
Well, I found most of them hear them inside, and it's when the voices are strong enough, to move outside. Because what happens is if they're hearing the voices from outside, then the patient knows that it's not them. It's something out there. They're hearing it out there.
Yeah.
The voices want to keep them confused about the source of those voices. They want them to think that voice is them. And psychiatry is coming right along and going, yeah, your brain is broken. The voices are you. You're mentally disturbed.
Yeah.
All you can do, it's a life sentence. All you could do is take these toxic drugs for the rest of your life.
Right.
So it's like they're doing more damage than they are good.
Well, of course they are, because that's more profit for the industry. But so with the MACE protocol, you're able to get underneath the source. And in your opinion, what is the actual source of this besides the trauma? Because you can make a case that there are people that have gone through the same trauma that didn't hear voices and that didn't develop schizophrenia. So what do you believe is the source?
Thank you for joining us for another incredible episode of the Medicine Girl podcast, where our mission is to ignite the power within so you can hear your divine wisdom and follow your soul's true north. Fear is loud, peace is quiet. Listen to the softest voice. Remember, no one is above you, no one is below you. They are just beside you. We are all walking each other home.